I want to start this conversation with former DHS Chief of Staff in Trump's first administration, Miles Taylor, and Jena Griswold, Colorado's Secretary of State, who's been battling false election claims. She's also the Democratic nominee in the race for state attorney general. It's good to see both of you this morning. Miles, I'm going to start with you and just let you go and give me your reaction to this primetime address from the president last night.
It's very hard to dissect this because in more ways than I expected, Donald Trump shot himself in the foot. And you said this in the lead-in. I mean, again and again, his goals last night were contradicted by the own documents he released. He wanted to show that there was a sweeping Chinese plot to keep him from becoming president. The documents themselves say that it was low-level activity that didn't result in any changed votes. He tried to portray the fact that the intelligence community hid this from him. The documents he released showed that he personally was delivered these assessments before he left office. He wanted to show that this justified the need for the Save America Act and voter ID. But the documents he released showed that votes weren't meddled with, that none of the tabulations were affected, that the election was free and fair. He wanted to show that deep state corruption affected the outcome of the election and hid this plot from the American people. What his documents he released ended up showing is that the information was declassified 5 years ago and that Donald Trump himself was briefed on it as far back as 2018 and made public speeches about it. If anything, the president last night should have thanked all of these public servants in intelligence, law enforcement, and homeland security under our first administration who helped protect his campaign, the Biden campaign, and the 2020 election. It was really, really extraordinary to me. My takeaway by the end of it was, I don't know how this speech got out of the White House and that no one said, Mr. President, you're about to prove the opposite case you think you're proving. But that's what happened last night.
Jena, at the same time, his allies, both political allies and in the media, I mean, they're cherry picking pieces of this, running with it as though there was groundbreaking information, despite the fact that experts say it's sort of a reheat of all the same stories and narratives that he's tried to push over the last 6 years. I think one of the most dangerous parts of what he put forward to was, the president saying that DHS has compiled this list, 278,000 non-citizens, they say, registered to vote. And when you hear that and you understand that we're 109 days away from the midterms, what do elections and law enforcement officials at the state-by-state level need to be doing to prepare right now, knowing that this DOJ may go after them if they claim and say that non-citizens got the opportunity to vote on their watch?
That's a great question, and good morning. Thanks for having me on. To take a step back, I totally agree with Miles that the presidential address was used to push out more election lies. The documents are nothing new, no bombshell, just a bunch of recycled, debunked claims by Donald Trump about our elections. But you are exactly right. That address and what the president has been doing is fundamentally dangerous for American democracy. Make no mistake, he is in an open power grab and actively working to destabilize the 26 elections. We have seen him weaponize every lever of the federal government, including now the presidential address, to try to inject chaos and doubt into the elections. And what states should be doing, what Colorado is doing, is building out contingencies for federal interference. The president may want to talk about debunked claims about foreign adversaries, but our top concern at this point is Donald Trump's federal interference. The state of Colorado, we have been working on our contingencies for a better part of a year with state and local actors, partners, to make sure that we're ready. We've also adjusted this last legislative session some of our laws, including the ability for the governor to call an election emergency caused by federal interference. We're going to be sending out mail ballots earlier. We're opening up drop boxes earlier to make sure that we have time if there's anything that we need to respond to. And also, I am very proud that we worked with the legislature to make it very clear for the 2028 election that no candidate for the third term of the presidency will ever appear on the Colorado ballot.
Miles, you know, a key part of this whole thing was the president's assertion that there's this sort of scary intel cover-up of documents that implicate China and Chinese actors here on U.S. soil. You personally briefed him. You acknowledge this. You were there in the first administration. Break down for me the truth.
Well, that's the reason I'm smiling is the president of the United States went and made a claim on national television last night that is easily disproven by living human beings who he appointed to serve in his first administration. He suggested that the plot from the Chinese Communist Party to potentially interfere in U.S. elections was something kept from the president. I can tell you the truth was we couldn't get the president to pay attention to election issues. We were screaming to the White House. When we finally did get Trump to pay attention to the fact that foreign adversaries like Russia and China were trying to interfere in 2018 and 2020, he only listened to the part where we said some of them, like China, might interfere to hurt him. He ignored the stuff about Russia. And if you don't believe me, that's okay, because you can go look in the public record that Donald Trump went to the UN General Assembly in September of 2018 and publicly declared what we had briefed him, that the Chinese Communist Party might try to interfere in our elections. This is damning. The president himself publicly warned about the thing he just told us last night no one ever warned him about. That completely contradicts itself. There's a lot more out there, but the point being, Donald Trump did not care in the first term about election security. He cared about selective election security, and that's why we at DHS, that's why people across the intelligence community were worried. He did not seem to want us to guard against interference that might help him, and he wanted us to guard against interference that might hurt him. What the intelligence community did, what the national security community did, is protect against both. And the documents Trump declassified last night show that the system worked. It protected his campaign, Joe Biden's campaign, and America's ballots.
You know, speaking of selective storytelling and cherry picking, right now, Secretary Mullen is speaking about the alleged threat of non-citizen voting, Jenna. And the Bipartisan Policy Center, I don't know how many Americans know this. They have studied this, and they're not the only ones. But they say that there are only 77 confirmed instances of non-citizen voting nationwide found between 1999 and 2023. That is more than 2 decades. And by the way, in every single one of those instances, the appropriate authorities investigated those cases. Jenna, from your standpoint, from your state, how real is the threat of non-citizen voting?
Non-citizen voting is extremely rare, extraordinarily rare. It's not something that there is any evidence of happening in a widespread manner. There is ample evidence that Mullins is an election denier and now leading the Department of Homeland Security. There is ample evidence that Donald Trump, although he talks about election security, is the person who has made our elections less secure. He took the helm in his second term. What does he do? Disbands the Department of Justice's work on foreign interference, disbands Department of Homeland Security's work on foreign disinformation. He then fires most of our federal partners that used to work with states and localities in securing our elections. They are using the bully pulpit of the presidency, of the federal administration, to mislead and lie to the American public for a very clear goal. Trump and MAGA know that they very well may not perform that well in November. So they are laying the groundwork to try to reject the results. That is what this is all about. We've also seen Trump issue 2 unlawful executive orders on elections during his second term. Those have largely been stopped. They're suing states all across the country to try to get access to sensitive voter data. They are largely losing. They've lost every case so far. And just last week, Trump's DOJ tried to intimidate election officials, threatening prosecution. Well, we will not be intimidated. And I want your viewers to know that there are people standing strong in every state rejecting this craziness coming from the federal administration. They will not succeed in trying to grab control over the 26th election, and we will have free and fair elections in November.
Well, I know that there are a lot of Americans who are worried about exactly that and counting on folks like you to stay in this fight so that they can feel secure about voting in November. Jena Griswold, Miles Taylor, always good to see both of you, and thank you.